This is one of the last images capturing Leslie Palacio, 22, in Las Vegas as she walks into the home of a longtime family acquaintance. A short time later, her disappearance would no longer be viewed as an ordinary missing person case. It would become a homicide investigation. And from that moment on, the biggest question in the entire case began to take shape. What happened inside that house on the morning of August 29, 2020? Leslie Palacio was a 22-year-old young woman living in Las Vegas, Nevada. Her family and the people who knew her remembered Leslie as someone caring, responsible, and always thinking of others. She was building a future in the medical field, and she was at the stage of life when many people believe the best years are still ahead. On the night of August 28, 2020, Leslie wanted to go out and unwind after an important milestone in school and work. It was not an unusual decision. It felt like a normal night for a young person trying to step away from the pressure of daily life. The person she went out with was Erick Rangel-Ibarra. What makes that detail important is that Erick was not a stranger. The two families had known each other for years. That familiarity made the night, on the surface, seem nothing like a dangerous situation. And that is also what makes this case so heavy in retrospect. Leslie did not go out with someone nobody knew. She went out with someone her family had reason to believe they knew well enough. That night did not begin with fear. It began with familiarity. And no one believed they were looking at the final hours of Leslie Palacio's life. That night began at Longhorn Hotel and Casino. At 12:31 a.m. on August 29, 2020, security cameras captured Leslie Palacio walking inside with Erick Rangel-Ibarra. If you looked only at that footage, it would seem like an ordinary moment in Las Vegas at night. Two people walking into a casino, no chaos. Nothing that would warn anyone about the ending waiting ahead. They stayed at Longhorn for more than an hour. At 1:56 a.m., the two of them left. After that, their path that night took them to Putter's Bar and Grill at around 2:15 a.m., and later to Bourbon Street Sports Bar and Grill. What stands out here is that the night did not end. It stretched across multiple locations over several hours. And as it moved closer to dawn, everything became harder to recognize at face value. Looking back, the story did not change because of one obvious explosive moment. It changed quietly, through each stop, each stretch of travel, and each silence between the time markers. Then came one detail Leslie's family would never forget. At around 4:40 a.m., Leslie sent a short text to a loved one. The message suggested that she wanted to talk about something that had just happened, but after that, the conversation never continued. Looking back, that message became a turning point, a sign that somewhere in the middle of that night, something had begun to change. And by the time Leslie's family realized something was wrong, the night had already gone too far to pull back. By the early morning of August 29, 2020, the story had begun to move in a very different direction. At around 6:05 a.m., a security camera from a neighboring home on Tipper Avenue captured Erick Rangel-Ibarra's vehicle stopping in front of the house. This was no longer a camera inside a casino or in a crowded public place. This was a residential security camera, quiet and far removed from the noise of the Las Vegas night. In that footage, Leslie Palacio is seen being helped out of the vehicle and taken inside by Erick. She was no longer in a condition where she could walk normally on her own. That detail is what makes this footage especially important, because this is the last image showing Leslie alive. There is no scream for help. There is no obvious struggle. There is only a vehicle stopping, a young woman being helped out, a door opening, and then closing. And from that moment on, the entire story disappears from view. The camera shows that Leslie arrived at that house. It shows who she went inside with, but it does not show what happened after the door closed. And that missing space is the heaviest part of the case. In missing person cases, the last known sighting is always the final point of certainty. In Leslie's case, 6:05 a.m. is that point. After Leslie Palacio is seen on camera entering the house on Tipper Avenue at 6:05 a.m., everything disappears behind that door. Then, around 7:25 a.m., the same camera system captures a completely different image. According to the way prosecutors later described the footage, Erick Rangel-Ibarra appears outside the house again. This time, he is not alone. He is joined by another man, whom investigators identified as Jose Rangel, Erick's father. What changes the direction of the case completely is that this is no longer the image of a young woman returning after a night out. It is the image of a motionless body being moved out of the house. After that, the camera also captures Jose Rangel spraying down the area outside the house. Based on what appears in that morning footage alone, the case could no longer be viewed as an ordinary missing person situation. It began to take the shape of a crime scene. This is the biggest turning point in the entire case, because until then, Leslie's family was doing what any family would do when a loved one does not come home. They called, they texted, they waited, they hoped. But what the camera captured that morning pushed the story in a completely different direction. From this point on, the question was no longer just where Leslie was. It became what happened inside that house after she walked in. The hardest part of this case does not lie in what the cameras recorded. It lies in what the cameras did not record. Between 6:05 a.m., when Leslie Palacio is seen entering the house on Tipper Avenue, and 7:25 a.m., when a motionless body is taken outside, nearly 1 hour disappears from everyone's view. There are no cameras inside that house in the publicly available material. There is no footage showing what happened after the door closed. When investigators later returned to the home, what they found suggested that the place had been cleaned up. Inside the house were gloves, cleaning supplies, and several items that suggested the scene was no longer intact. In Erick Rangel-Ibarra's room, the bed no longer had sheets on it. On the mattress and in other areas, investigators documented marks they believed were significant to the case. But one point still has to be kept very clear. In the case record, Leslie's cause of death was not definitively determined at the beginning. That means that even though the exterior camera footage is strong, the middle of the story still has to be reconstructed from what was left behind. From the evidence inside the house, from the investigative record, from witness statements, and years later, from new evidence updates. That is why that 1 hour inside the house became the most haunting part of the entire case. It was short, but it was enough to turn a night out into a case that would stretch across many years. After the camera footage on Tipper Avenue completely changed the direction of the case, the search for Leslie Palacio became a race against time. Investigators began piecing together the final traces she had left behind. Phone data, security footage, the truck's route, the times they left each location. But while the case file was taking shape, Leslie's family was living in fear of the worst. Then, on September 9th, 2020, what they feared most became reality. Leslie Palacio's body was found in the Moapa Valley area, near Valley of Fire State Park, Nevada. From that moment on, there was no longer hope that she had simply lost contact and would come back. But the story did not end there. What made this case drag on was not only what happened inside the house on Tipper Avenue. It was also what happened after that. Jose Rangel and Erick Rangel-Ibarra disappeared. Their disappearance pushed the case into an entirely different phase. It was no longer just a crime scene investigation. It became a search that would last for years. On January 19th, 2021, Jose turned himself in. He later accepted legal responsibility related to his role after the incident. But the man prosecutors viewed as the center of the case was still not there. Erick Rangel-Ibarra was still outside the United States. As the years passed, the case never disappeared from Leslie's family's memory. It simply turned into a different kind of pain. It was no longer the fear of not knowing where Leslie was. It became the pain of waiting for justice while the man accused as the main suspect remained out of reach of the court. Then, years later, there was finally a major turn. On August 28, 2025, Erick Rangel-Ibarra was extradited to Las Vegas. Then, on September 11, 2025, Erick appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. His trial was later set for August 24, 2026. And then, just when many people thought the case was only waiting for trial, another layer of the file emerged. In early March 2026, prosecutors announced an update involving DNA evidence and sought to amend the indictment. That showed the case was still changing. And it was still moving closer to the question Leslie's family had waited years to have answered. What really happened to her that morning? Even though Leslie Palacio's case has gone through years of investigation, multiple legal updates, and major turns, one thing has never changed. It still feels like the story has not truly ended. The cameras showed the key time markers. Phone data reconstructed much of the route from that night. The scene left behind important evidence, and years later, new evidence updates were added to the case. But even with all of that, there are still central questions that only the trial process can fully answer. What happened between 6:05 a.m. and 7:25 a.m.? What happened after the door to that house closed? And will what prosecutors present be enough to fill in the biggest gap in the entire timeline? That is why this case is haunting, not only because of what has been seen, but because of what is still missing. Legally, this case still has to be viewed through a very clear principle. Every final allegation must be tested in court. Every piece of evidence must be examined through the proper process. And every final conclusion must come from trial. But on another level, the case also leaves behind clear lessons. It shows how important a last known location can be. It shows how even one short text just before dawn can become a crucial point in an investigation. And it shows that there are cases where, even with cameras, a timeline, and a scene, justice can still be delayed for years. Until the trial actually takes place, this case remains in a state of waiting for answers. And for Leslie's family, one thing has never changed. They are still waiting for justice. Leslie Palacio's case leaves behind many questions that still do not have final answers. But what has been captured through cameras, investigative records, and legal filings shows that this was not just an ordinary missing person case. This is a story about decisions, gaps in the timeline, and a wait for justice that stretched over many years. At the same time, it is also a reminder of the value of evidence in an investigation, the importance of responding early when something feels wrong, and the reality that some cases take a very long time to reach an actual trial. Until a court reaches a final conclusion, every person mentioned in this case must still be viewed under the principle of presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Thank you for following this case today. I hope this video helps viewers better understand what happened and why Leslie Palacio's case is still being followed even now. Take care, goodbye, and I will see you in the next video.